So how does it apply to us today, as it did then? The scribes and the Pharisees calculated that the law contained 248 commandments, 365 prohibitions. It's a lot of law, isn't it? A lot of things not to do. But they weren't so good at abiding by it. They weren't so good at being obedient to it. They tried to make the law and its demands less demanding. Throughout the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus seeks to reverse this tendency. He says, the way you've always understood it and the way you've heard it from people is wrong. Jesus said that instead, the full implications of God's commandments must be accepted without imposing limits. Whereas the limit God had set to his permission must also be accepted and not arbitrarily increased. It's basically saying, don't go to one extreme or the other extreme. Accept the law for what it is. That is in spirit and truth. That is in spirit and person. In our actions and in our heart. In regards to anger, Jesus spoke about unrighteous anger, the anger of pride, vanity, hatred, malice, and revenge. We can't allow this feeling to remain. Can't allow it to grow. And we can't delay in putting it right, which is why Jesus was very urgent about what he stated. If we want to avoid committing murder in God's sight, we must take every possible positive step to live in peace, live with all people. The reason why Jesus said you have to do it fast tells us how serious the offence is. If murder is a horrible crime, malice, anger, insult are horrible too. And so is every deed, word, look, or thought by which we hurt or offend another human being. As for adultery, the teaching of Jesus here refers to unlawful sex outside of marriage, whether practiced by married or unmarried people. And similarly, Jesus' allusion is to all forms of immorality. So we step back even more, and what Jesus is trying to help us understand is that those sorts of things in our heart will lead to other acts of immorality. If we start to push away one law or justify ourselves under one law, why don't we just do it for all of them? Why don't we find a way to just justify our actions? Need to be careful that we don't only see this as a man lusting after a woman, or even vice versa, or only married to a married man or to an unmarried man. The offender is said to commit adultery, not fornication. It's to be guilty of the very sin that Jesus was condemning in the Pharisees. What he emphasizes is that any and every sexual practice which is immoral indeed is immoral also in look and thought. And we do need to keep going back to God and saying, God, help me in my thought life. Help me. This is not to say that if we have the thoughts, you are condemned. That's it, it's done, you're finished, it's all over. Because God has made a way for us to come back to him every time, to ask for forgiveness, to say, Lord, how do I improve my thought life? Pray, read the word. But we need continually to seek to try and eliminate it. The moment it starts to grow, maybe take root, if we recognize it, the recognition itself is a good thing. It's when we ignore it, it's when we justify it and say, it's all right, it's fine. If we don't, these things can be sources of temptation. But we take the wider view. Ultimately, what Jesus exposes here is that we are entirely incapable of being pure before a holy God. So he speaks about the fulfillment of the law, and then we have 5 different laws that he talks about, that the Pharisees spoke about, that was from Moses. And he shows that we are unable to fulfill those laws. That our goodness, even in our determination and want to, I'm going to really not think about it, it's not going to work. These are hard things to get our head around, because what we're trying to say, and what Jesus is saying, I believe, is that don't do it, but he knows you're going to do it. And the great thing about that is that he's got a solution for it. If he never identified it, and then we're experiencing something that Jesus never talked about, we go, well, where am I now? Am I lost? Am I gone? Is it over? Jesus' very identification of these things is for our good. It means he knows to the very extent, the depths of our soul, how sinful we are. He says, but it's okay, because he came to fulfill the law and make it perfect. So you're not striving to make the law anymore. You're not striving to be a good Christian. You want to honor Jesus with your life, because he fulfilled the law on your behalf. Our goodness is not sufficient to impress God and earn our salvation based on our own merit. The wider view here is that murder takes away life, and we put ourselves in the position of judge. You see, the bigger picture here is that what we're doing is being gods. Once we say, I can take a life, once we even think that we can do it, we're being our own little gods. We're taking what is God's and trying to make it for us. In the same way, adultery is more than the man and the woman, because it can lead to spiritual adultery. That's cheating on God by giving praise to that which is worldly or an idol. See how clever God is? This is amazing. You step back each time, you go, well, actually, it's not only about this one particular law, there's a principle in here. Because if I can cheat on my wife or my husband, why can't I cheat on God? Why can't I take it that much further? Why can't I keep going and going if I justify that to myself? There are bigger spiritual things that are at play here that Jesus wants us to see. In this, Jesus is teaching us that the power of life and death is his. Just as all worship, praise, honor, and adoration belong to God alone. And so we have to, especially when we look at these verses, when we look at the law of the Old Testament, it must come back to Jesus. Only for accepting Jesus as him who came to fulfill the scriptures and save us from the condemnation of the law that we deserve, can we truly be called righteous in God's sight. No longer do you need to live to the law, but in my acceptance that Jesus Christ has fulfilled the law, I want to do well by him. I want to live a life that honors him in as best as I can do, but also without striving. If I accept Jesus, I'm saved. It is done. Let me leave you with this last set of verses, James 1, 22 to 25. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. Jesus. The Sunday school answer church is Jesus. Let's pray.